Well, hi, everybody. Um, I guess I'm used to saying when I talk to Michael Crow, I say, hi here, Michael, instead of hi there, because that gives us the feeling of being together. Now, my next offering here, this being the 16th of November, and we're on page 64, is program number 25. And yes, not too bad. We seem to be more or less, more or less in the right place. And let's see, just a little segue here from program 24. Now, you know how these are sent out. BL and Harold, with Joe's assistance, put them up on Makara and or our YouTube, our normal YouTube channel, which we've been using so long that you certainly should have it by this time. And then I send out a kind of a special sendings for people who want what I'm doing here in a slightly different form. And if you're on that list, you'll know what that means. The audio transcript is on the right, and a picture of myself as the speaker, a bit larger, on the right also. And then in the major part of the screen is everything that I've been showing. So, DK has been talking about the development of psychology and medicine, and how far they have gone, reasonably far, but he's not taking them up right now. He basically says, with all this we shall not attempt to deal. It is correct as far as it goes, and if I may interpolate, obviously, DK is trying to take the whole prospect farther than humanity has been able to take it up to this point. Instead, he's saying, we shall continue ourselves, we shall confine ourselves to a consideration of the contacts and impacts which confront the disciple and initiates of the world today. Now, may I interpolate those two words? Contacts and impacts have been frequently used. And contacts are perhaps hidden factors in the environment, the subtle and subjective environment, and impacts are the reception of higher sources by a lower source, and a generated mutuality between the two, a back and forth, um, an interaction between the impacting uh, higher factor and the receiving factor. So instead of going on and saying what humanity has thus far achieved, um, we are confining ourselves to the impacts, contacts and impacts which confront the disciples and initiates the world, of the world today, as they work in the hierarchy and through the ashram, and whose path of advance is as a shining light, which shineth evermore until full enlightenment has been achieved. And may I interpolate, that reminds me of the statement, the path of the just is as a shining light, which shineth more and more until the day be with us. Now that light of day is a scorpionic light and has to do with the Buddhic plane, whereon I would say at this point, the majority of monads find their active expression. Some few still on the highest subplane of the cosmic mental plane, and other few within the realm of the atma aspect of the spiritual triad. Now I just want to make sure that this sound is being heard. Hopefully it is, and hopefully all is correct. Now, this is a sharing. Okay. So we're beginning with program 25 in Telepathy and the Etheric Vehicle, video commentary, and we're relying upon BL and Joe to write some synopses, some abbreviated collections of thoughts regarding what I have been attempting to talk about. Okay, so this next section is called Sequential Revelation of Relationships. It's a rather long section, and some 9 pages or so, and I don't think it is possible for us to complete commentary on all of those, 11 pages actually. No, I don't think we can. But we can get started, you know. So he says, I would like to refer you back to page 52, where I outlined this extraordinary science, which is inherently in itself the evidence of evolution, of the essential dualism in manifestation, and the testimony, unalterable and incontrovertible to the unfoldment of consciousness. So let's mark that out as being important, and not exactly sure, can we get back to page 52? Perhaps if I use this one, we can get back to page 52. And there are two results. And yes, the supreme science of contact begins on page 52. And so it says these three sciences, three great sciences, which form three modes of expression of what might be called the supreme science of contact, and these three sciences are all equally interdependent, and they are the science of impression, the science or technique of invocation and evocation, and the science of telepathy. That's what he wanted to refresh our memories regarding. Okay. But rather, here we are beginning with program 25. He says, I'd like to refer you back to page 52, where I outlined this extraordinary science, which is inherently in itself the evidence of evolution, of essential dualism in manifestation, and the testimony, unalterable and intraconvertible, to the unfoldment of consciousness. Okay. Hopefully you're hearing me satisfactorily and can see the pages that I'm on. He goes on to say, well, our subject is sequential revelation of relationships. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Those relationships, they are contacts, potentially. And they do exist, even if not at first cognized, but through the eventual progress of sensitization and the continuing evolution of the consciousness of the receiver, then we will indeed have knowledge of these things which are here discussed. We will have the evidence of evolution. We will have the essential dualism in manifestation, and the testimony to the unfoldment of consciousness. Now, that is something that is particularly focal at this time of our development. An increase in the sensitivity of our consciousness. A great science of sensitivity, the basic science of sensitivity, is here involved. Okay. Now, going on with what the Tibetan is saying, at the same time, it proceeds upon the basic premise that the various phases of consciousness, which are steadily and sequentially revealed in time and space, are, and this may be a little more difficult, are, from the point of view of the eternal now, the sum total of the states of consciousness of the one in whom we live and move and have our being. Now, that one is usually considered to be at first anyway, the planetary logos. He is the first one in whom we live and move and have our being. And it's all going on simultaneously, which perhaps is what is meant by, from the point of view of the eternal now. When we think about the universal logos, he has his eye upon all emanations which have come forth from him. He has his eye upon them all simultaneously. And there is, in that sense, an eternal now occurring, because he never lets go of the perception of every emanation which his own self-division has produced. Now, there are maybe other ways of considering the eternal now. If we take up the factor of a superimposition of all the many points forming simply one point. We dealt with that rather difficult subject, I think, in our last meeting, seeds of the infinite and the identification as being. See, I think we shall find out that time disappears, space disappears in the kind of superimposition that we have been speaking of. That all the many apparent points are really simply one point. And all the many points are superimposed upon each other to make the one point which eradicates our usual conceptions of time and space. But as I say, that's a special kind of program which is a little bit deviant from the kind of thing that Master DK customarily discusses. Okay. So, just to say that there are many in whom we live and move and have our being, and our status diminishes the greater the entity in whom we live and move and have our being. We are something of a larger nature when compared with the council members of Shambhala or the planetary logos per se, and we become increasingly diminished as we consider living and moving and having our being in ever greater units, such as within the solar logos, within the cosmic logos. Always as the entity has greater scope, we become diminished accordingly. Okay. Now, let's just make sure that I'm doing this correctly. DK goes on and says, all these phases of consciousness or of conscious acceptance of existing phenomena and their related reactions are to Sanat Kumara what a day's experience and reactions or the current life experiences are to the intelligent man, only vastly more enveloping and comprehensive. So we're looking at Sanat Kumara as an extension of the planetary logos, and certainly within the planetary logos we live and move and have our being, but also as well within the great Kumara, it can be said that likewise we live and move and have our being within him. So I'm just going to separate this just a bit. There's so much going on of such great expanse, breadth, and depth. And all of this, well, it's reduced for Sanat Kumara down to a day's experience. and his reactions, or the current life experiences of the intelligent man. A day in the life of Sanat Kumara. And, in fact, we might um, turn to the books. I think it's The Rays and the Initiations. I think so. To explore what is the daily ritual of Sanat Kumara. And that is a very beautiful description, and I think you've seen it a number of times. Let's see. Hmm. Well, friends, I may not have been recording this last little bit. We'll find out shortly what has happened. But DK goes on to say that, curiously enough, the discovery of quality as the second aspect in manifestation, later to be superseded, called for, and developed the critical faculty in man. This critical faculty, so destructive in its present use, and let's call it related to the third aspect, this critical faculty, so destructive in its present use, will be correctly expressed when the nature of relationship is better grasped and true function of ideas is properly understood. Okay. So this has to do, I think, with the intelligence aspect. And when we think about Atma, we think not only of the will, but we think of intelligence as well. I think I will have to stop here because there is a question concerning, at page 67, a question concerning whether these these recordings have been taking place at a certain point. Let's just let us see. So so number 25 is over, and it went up to 67. Now we'll see probably just the failure to press one button may have accounted for the need for hours more of work. But anyway, this will be the end of 25, and 64 has taken us to 67, and depending on how we do. Number 26 will be the next one at a certain point. And we will see it's going to start from page 67. You know, there is that shiver which runs down my spine when I realize that I may have been talking, but it may not have been recording. So that's certainly possible. At the moment, however, I will stop the recording and hope for the best. Okay, hi friends. This is actually a continuation of program 25, but I'm calling it 25.1 because I made a dreadful mistake. Seems to be my way lately. And I did not press resume when I intended to show you or discuss with you a little bit of the daily ritual of Sanat Kumara and compare it, vast though it is, to something of the daily ritual of a human being. And it was at that point that about 30-something minutes just disappeared without recording. So this is and I trust you see, this is the seventh purpose of Sanat Kumara. And we want to know what is his way of relating to the three worlds. And this pretty well gives it to us, and there is an analogy between his relationship to a much vaster context, the entire planetary context, really, and especially the personality of man, or of humanity, its dweller, and the daily ritual or happenings in the life of the average disciple. This tells us something about grasping a vision in the eternal now. And I began to talk about the ways of deriving the eternal now. From some point of view, it is the view point of the great hyparxis, the head of whatever hierarchy it may be, seeing all its emanations simultaneously. That's one way to look at the eternal now. Another way has to do with the factor of superimposition, the maybe strange to some idea or thought that every emanation of the hyparxis the head of the hierarchy, whatever hierarchy it may be, is superimposed upon each other. So there's really only one kind of point that remains after this superimposition takes place. It's a pretty far out thought, but it probably works when you think about the way some final representation of any universe has to be reabsorbed into the trans-universal state and ultimately into the state which we call absoluteness. So this is what I wanted to show you when my luck ran out, or, well, I've got to get someone else to do the technical part of this, and Mikhail is helping a lot on that account. Okay, the final phase of the divine purpose is the most difficult of all to indicate. And when I say indicate, I mean exactly that and nothing more definite or clear. Okay, so we'll just follow this a bit. This is, well, maybe I'm not going to be able to do anything but just show it to you without highlighting anything. When I hear those bells go off, I don't know if you just heard it, but it's never a good sign. But anyway, he challenges us a little bit, and he says, regarding this seventh purpose, does it mean anything to you when I say that the ceremonial ritual of the daily life of Sanat Kumara, I would really love to highlight that, but feel I am destined for... No, it's not going to let me, and I'm not going to pursue the manner in which it might let me, because the hour is very late. When I failed with 21 or 25, I determined that I would not fail with 25.1, and I hope I don't. So he's asking us a question. Does it mean anything to you when I say that the ceremonial ritual of the daily life of Sanat Kumara, implemented by music and sound and carried on the waves of color, which break upon the shores of the three worlds of human evolution, reveal in the clearest notes and tones and shades the deepest secret behind his purpose. What a statement that is. And, well, I did I did kind of manage this. I see what the problem was. Okay. So I hope I don't confound the issue too much. So this will be in fact what I was trying to do in the other one, and I don't have any more to. I can erase this one. Maybe I can erase it. Maybe. Okay. I guess I had that all queued up and didn't realize it. So, does it mean anything to us? And DK says, it scarcely makes sense to you and is dismissed as a piece of symbolic writing used by me to convey the unconveyable. Yet I am not here speaking in symbols, but am making an exact statement of fact. As beauty in any of its greater forms breaks upon human consciousness, may I interpolate? I remember when I was maybe 5 years old, being taken by a close relative to Carnegie Hall in Chicago, and hearing probably for the first time, certainly the first time live, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. I was utterly enthralled, and beauty in, for me anyway, in some form, was breaking upon the human consciousness, my own very undeveloped consciousness. But as that happens, going on with the Tibetan, a dim sense is thereby conveyed of the ritual of Sanat Kumara's daily living. More I cannot say. Cannot, or will not, or would we be so incapable of understanding? That might be the case, of course. Here are hints. DK goes on to say, here are hints, therefore, as to the divine purpose each of the 7 supplements and completes the other 6. So that interactivity is of the utmost importance, and we really don't know the way the interactivity occurs. But we trust that under the great second ray, it does occur. Only by attempting to grasp the whole inner synthesis will we arrive at the merest, notice how he points that word out, merest hint of the nature of that exalted consciousness which has brought our planet and all that is within and upon it into being. Well, that would be the planetary logos and his extension. Sanat Kumara. Yeah, well, that's kind of what I wanted to point out before technical misfortune, from which I did not rapidly recover, afflicted my process. Now, let's see if I will now go back to something else, and maybe this will. I've shown you now what I wanted to show, and I think now I'm back where I started from with program 25.1. Now, well, there are just some wonderful ideas here. And I am hoping that that I said enough that made sense in the earlier part of program 25, that it is sufficient to get us started, and then Michael will splice this together and it will look a little more coherent. We've been talking about atma-buddhi, basically, and its reflection of the monadic levels as spirit and reason, atma-buddhi, and it is the product of the multiplicity in unity, of which we hear so much. Well, unity, it's a very Aquarian idea. Unity in diversity, diversity in unity, the result of universality, and I think very connected with the second ray, though sometimes the third ray will have much connection to what we might call the many and the one. So in this multiplicity, in unity, of which we hear so much, especially as we begin going towards the Aquarian age, we have a demonstration of activity, quality, ideology, rationality, relationship, unity, and many other expressions of the divine nature. And he tells us how he spoke of life, quality, and appearance at the beginning in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1. This was apparent to man, he tells us, and quality was especially emphasized as the second aspect, due to the present point in human evolution. Quality plus activity appear to be the two lower aspects of divine manifestation. Let's call it the 2 and the 3, and we know, don't we, that we have a planet which is characterized by the second ray soul and third ray personality. Now, this is reflected in Atma atma-buddhi, or let's just say there is a correlation there. And if we went high enough into the monadic and supermonadic plane, we would find something generative of the idea of quality and activity. Quality and activity. That's pretty much as far as we have gotten right now because, well, although our planet is a first-ray monad, it is occultly, that monad is to a large extent occultly ineffective, non-effective, because we are a non-sacred planet. Were we a sacred planet, the two higher planes would be more engaged with the lower, but they are still somewhat engaged so that atma-buddhi reflect them, and also the personality, soul and personality rays of our particular planet are reflected in something that begins as high as the truly esoteric planes, the monadic and supermonadic. So I guess I wrote this in that already quality and activity are now being superseded, and there are two others are, if anything, superseding them in the consciousness of thinking humanity. And this would be the superseding factors would be relationship and ideas. And he expects still other qualities to appear as the planet unfolds towards its true sacredness. So this science of contact, I'm kind of going over things a little bit. The science of contact will not only reveal quality, says the Tibetan, but is revealing lines of relationship which underlie all manifestation, and of which the etheric body is the symbol. So the science of contact, it has much to do with the hidden factors all around us, and as we begin to experience impression and impact, there's an interactivity which begins to be noticed. The science of contact, it is also, says the Tibetan, rendering man sensitive to ideas as the unfolding intellect of man permits it. And let's just say, parenthetically here, that we're not going to be subject to the basic science of sensitivity unless we release ourselves from habitual confinement in lesser states of awareness. So, the revelations. Okay. Well, there's just really depth to study here, and hopefully I said something earlier that was of some value. The the rendering of man sensitive to ideas, as the unfolding intellect of man may permit it. Okay. The reaction of humanity to these two revelations, which come, if you could but realize it, as the result, the reward of contact and of impact, and of the impact of life, reason, that's pretty much atma-buddhi, upon that manifestation which has always been present, though unrealized, will bring about vast changes and more far-reaching results than has the reaction to quality. Now that's interesting. Quality is of importance, but there is more. Quality is temporary, and sometimes I talk to myself and to the students, and I say, when you look at something, take away your concern regarding its quality and see it only in terms of its being or beingness, which all factors in manifestation, all factors in our particular universe, which they all share. Beingness is identical, and quality is amazingly diverse, but it takes some work to do that. He talks about the critical faculty in man being developed, which is associated with the third aspect of a deity. Well, we know that when we're looking at glamours, the glamour of criticism is associated with the third aspect. The glamour of self-pity with the second aspect, and the glamour of pride and such factors is associated with the first aspect. It has a kind of paranoid potential, that first ray. So we can certainly misuse these various faculties. But basically, quality leads to the development, useful development, of the critical faculty. It can be correctly expressed, as DK says, when the nature of the relationship is better grasped and the true function of ideas is properly understood. Ideas are those beings in corporeal, which have neither form nor particular pattern, but which cause form and pattern to appear in denser type of matter. So there are various definitions of that kind found in the books. Now, let's see where we are here, as I don't want to make another costly mistake. Looks like we're okay for the moment. And going on with what we might call 25.1, instead of 26, as I had hoped, we will take up some new statements by the Tibetan. Now remember, we have the science of impression, we have the science of invocation and evocation, sometimes called a technique, and we have the supreme science of contact. And these other sciences underlie that supreme science of contact. So let's see what he says. And I will try to forget what hour it is at the moment. Anyway, this supreme science of contact governs all reactions to impact. Well, we've already been told about impact, haven't we? What have we been told? We've been told that it's not simply the pressure, the strike, the blow, which comes from a higher source, but impact is the induction of a future interactivity between the impacting factor and the recipient. So there is a kind of a back and forth interplay in all matters of impact, which is of a considerable importance. Now let's think about that. You are, let's say, struck by something. You know, sometimes we say, oh, I'm struck by the thought that, and then we go on. Do we just drop it at that point? Or do we begin working back and forth with the impacting agent and ourselves? And DK is suggesting that the interplay is the result of impact. Now, you know, a lot of this, may I say, might simply be theoretical. It is often at times, for me, simply theoretical. I said, well, yeah, I think I understand the theory here. But is this a normal, daily, way of life yet. And I would say, well, I have some distance to go, and maybe that is true for you too. So this supreme science of contact governs all reactions to impact. It has to start to become a real experience for us. And therefore we have to be very watchful, very careful to see what is actually beginning to occur in our consciousness. Or we just go back to the books and said, well, okay, say I read that somewhere. Okay, so DK goes on and says, this statement includes the cosmic reaction of Sanat Kumara, because he does receive a kind of impact from great sources such as Sirius and certain constellational and other planetary sources. Okay, so this statement includes the cosmic reactions of Sanat Kumara down to the scarcely discernible reactions, invisible almost even to the eye of the seer, of the, and here he does use that word, of the infinitesimal atom. Well, we can question, is he trying to be precise here in the use of that term? I don't think it's meant to be a mathematical use of the term. That's my estimation, but it does convey the idea of something extremely small, which does find itself engaged as a recipient, at least in this supreme science of contact with its impact. And is there any kind of conscious interplay? I guess I wouldn't call it conscious interplay, not until we reach the stage of man, of humanity, can there be conscious interplay between the impacting factor and that which is impacted. I think one has to be very sensitive to engage in this basic science of sensitivity, which is basically the science of impression. One has to live an ongoingly meditative life, watchful, and disabused of as much glamour and illusion as may be possible. Okay, now, DK knows it is a difficult subject. As a matter of fact, maybe of all the books I've read, even Cosmic Fire, I find this book challenging. Perhaps it's because it belongs as instruction to the first seed group. Had I been a member of the discipleship group attracted or invited to work with Master DK, I'm pretty sure that I would not have been put into that first seed group. But the more advanced types, Alice Bailey, Foster Bailey, I think Roberto Assagioli, Regina Keller, at least 4 of them quite advanced in their work with occultism. They were in that group. And others for reasons that DK would know. Okay, well, again, for the sake of clarity, he says, for the sake of clarity, I divided the science of contact, the supreme science of contact, into 3 major divisions, basing them upon the reactions of the 3 major planetary centers to their environment. Maybe he means here Shambhala, hierarchy, and humanity. So this is for the sake of clarity. And maybe before, when we were studying these matters, that's what he did. Let's see if he does anything further. This is a point, he says, I would have you carefully bear in mind. I could write a treatise longer than this one, purely on the creation of the response apparatus, which each of these 3 centers of divine life, reason, had to form in order to make the needed contact and interpret correctly. Okay. He knows the difficulty of the subject he is proposing to impart. The reaction of, 3 major divisions and the reactions of the 3 major planetary centers. Let me just say, I suppose, Shambhala, hierarchy, and humanity, to their environment. And then again, I will repeat what he said. This is a point which I would have you carefully bear in mind. And then what I know, we all know to be true, given Master DK's vast, comprehensive, and deep knowledge at least for a master found upon the Earth scheme and within the fourth chain, he says, I could write a treatise longer than this one. Purely on the creation of the response apparatus which each of these three centers of divine life reason had to form in order to make the needed contact and interpret correctly. So, what can we say? That, let's see if this works. Yeah. We can say that each of the major three centers develops its own apparatus. That is the word. Apparatus for correct interpretation. Okay. Well, that's an insert, and I try not to do too many of those because it takes a while to write them down. But okay. I put them in purple pretty much and then put brackets around them. So let's see. Shambhala has its response apparatus. It had to be developed. Hierarchy has its response apparatus. It had to be developed. Humanity has its apparatus, which, though much less comprehensive and much less in depth than the others, had to be developed so that there would be relief from error in interpretation, whether the error crept in through etheric chaos or through glamorous misleading or through well, all the things the first ray represents, both in this case in terms of pride and hardness and insensitivity and lack of love and such things. Okay, so we will go on with what DK is saying. Apparatus which these different centers or planetary centers had to develop. Otherwise, without the apparatus, how is the center supposed to reach and influence subsidiary centers. It couldn't do it. You know, when I see now going on, when I see the word paradoxes, I kind of breathe a sigh of relief, because I have felt this whole instruction to have in it many paradoxes, or difficult to solve problems, and multiple names for the same thing. Let's just say to disentangle all that DK has given, though he is highly illumined and very well organized. It's just to disentangle is a chore based upon our own insufficiencies, and we certainly have them. So there are many paradoxes in what I am here giving you, and apparently some contradictions. You know, when DK in his work seems to offer contradiction, you can be sure that it's the inability of our own interpretive apparatus which makes what is not contradictory seem so. And apparently, he says, some contradictions where orthodox occultism is concerned. But let me add that he's taking the whole subject beyond the orthodox presentation, even of occultism. And within the theosophical writings, we do find a presentation which is more orthodox in its appeal. Now, DK is expanding that. So he says there are paradoxes. Sorry. There are paradoxes in what I'm here giving you, and apparently some contradictions where orthodox occultism is concerned, but that is ever the case as the teaching expands in content, and the earlier all-inclusive facts, apparently all-inclusive, I would add, all-inclusive facts are seen to be minor aspects of still greater facts. So we have to keep that in mind, that in transition, such as we are receiving from Master DK, there will always be some initial confusions and seeming contradictions. Apparently some contradictions. And, well, you know, let's just say, if we have been trained in the earlier methods, it causes some disturbance, some, what do they call it, cognitive dissonance in our consciousness to find earlier acceptances rejected to a degree, or expanded to the point where they are no longer inclusive in the way we thought they were. apparently some contradictions, but that is ever the case where, as the teaching expands and the earlier inclusive facts are seen to be something relatively minor compared to a larger picture. I want to add that people do find themselves threatened by a larger picture. If we go back to the onset of the Counter-Reformation, I guess it was chosen that a man who offered a much vaster picture would have to be put to death, and hopefully from the point of view of the reformers, not really reformers, but backtrackers, his ideas would die with him. But in fact, as Master Moria tells us, one can fuel the vitality of the of certain ideas through the very unpleasant, may I add, the effect of the stake that is being burned alive, and that is basically what happened in the case of Giordano Bruno. Even though they tried to stop his mouth from saying anything, they put on some kind of gag apparatus, and he could not impart any famous last words. It's curious that Annie Besant, I'm not sure how accurate it really is, but she had identified strongly with being Giordano Bruno. But when I look at the nature of her contribution and the more somewhat scientific and artistic contribution of Bruno, I'm not sure that Annie Besant was expressing anything other than intense admiration for a very courageous but critical man. There were others who may have said things that were just as threatening to the church, but they had a way of saying them. And Giordano Bruno was caustic in his manner of speaking. So I understand. And then he was therefore singled out to be made an example, whereas these others, whose ideas were perhaps just as threatening, but whose manner was more ingratiating, they were spared. That is a curious way that human beings respond not only to what's being said, but how it is being said. So going on a bit here, and always hoping that I am recording, because so far it looks like it. And I don't have that original sound on, which makes gasping a little more annoying, but which is useful when doing ohms, because the ohm is sustained, when the original sound is on, but since I really can no longer do the ohms the way I want to, I might as well just leave it the way it is. Okay. As you can see, therefore, the significance and the importance, or you can see, therefore, the significance and importance of the dictum, the teaching, something that is didactic, importance of the dictum in the secret doctrine that the hierarchy and all in the council chamber of Sanat Kumara, or Shambhala, have invariably passed through the human stage of evolution. For only human beings can perfectly blend and express life, reason, and only human intellect can consciously create what is needed in order to bring the needed stages of manifested life into being, or maybe expression, perhaps. And that is interesting. There's a meeting and a blending that goes on in the human group. And maybe once we move beyond that, we run into units of life that can no longer be considered strictly human, but rather are considered, or what are they considered? They are hierarchical, they are triadal, they are monadic in their nature. And in those other states, the balanced blending is, it seems to be, missing. Only human intellect, only human beings, I'll read it again, only human beings, says the Tibetan, can perfectly blend and express life, reason, which is basically atma-buddhi, and only human intellect can consciously create what is needed in order to, well, manifest, really, isn't it? In order to bring the needed stages of manifested life into, let's call it actuality. He calls it being, into objectivity. So that is something we may not have understood, because we certainly give great credit to the hierarchy without thinking about balance, and we give great credit to the monadic levels, again, without thinking about the balance which the human being can achieve. Okay. Well, how do we know? Because perhaps Sanat Kumara or Shambhala, and because hierarchy do not produce this same type of balance, we begin to realize that they, in fact, have passed through the human stage. I'll just do a little bit more now. Up to page 67 we are. I think we began on page 64, but it's late, and this is going to be spliced together with the previous program. So let's say just a little bit more about this, that there is some kind of balance achieved in the human kingdom. And though the other kingdoms are great, greater by far, the same kind of balance is not achieved. And humanity is needed to help consciously create what is needed to bring the needed stages of manifestation into being. Just a little bit more then. Here again, says the Tibetan, and just make sure that I'm, looks like I'm okay. Here again emerges another reason for the importance of the, quote, center which we call the race of men. And that's, of course, in the great invocation number 3. Upon the shoulders of humanity rests unbelievable responsibility. Well, do we want to accept that? Or do we want to be, as it were, saved? Saved from ourselves? The importance of this race of men, and on the shoulders of humanity rests this unbelievable responsibility. Would we believe it if we knew it? Therefore, whether we are dealing with simple telepathy, now he runs down the list of what we might be dealing with, or with invocation and evocation, or with impression, these 3 sort of supports to the great supreme science of contact, we are in reality considering the effect of life reason as it manifests in relation to the available and suitable environment. All of this really, does it not, requires pondering. Definitely. So telepathy, invocation, simple telepathy, invocation, or with, I guess he would mean, the science of impression. We are indeed, we are in reality considering the effect of, what shall we call it, atma-buddhi, as reflecting the monadic levels, the effective life reason, atma-buddhi, as it manifests in relation to the available and suitable environment. Maybe man provides that environment. So we're asked to note this phrase because he gives us thoughts which are demanding and require much pondering if we're going to fathom them. All this, he says, takes place through men in process of being made perfect. Perfection, well, it's not the perfection of the fourth level of the atmic plane, but it is perfection as far as man's present potentials are concerned. So all of this takes place through men in process of being made perfect, through men who have attained a relative perfection, and through men who, in the majority of cases, arrived at perfection elsewhere than in this present manifesting cycle. And if I may interpolate, I would call that, by and large, the moon chain. Maybe some few in the previous major solar system, all together. So there are several, well, there are a number of possibilities. But there's no question that the human being is instrumental to the higher atma-buddhi, life, consciousness, whatever duality we choose to use as reflecting the monadic levels and impacting the present level of man. Okay, a little bit more. This should indicate to you the potentiality hidden in the very lowest of the human family. Well, why? Because, of course, something inherent is going to help them grow, and there are greater impacting sources which will facilitate that growth. This should indicate to you, says the Tibetan, the potentiality hidden in the very lowest of the human family, and the future of wonder and of usefulness which lies ahead for each and all in due time and after due effort. So it's very promising indeed if we can have the patience to pass through the developmental stages as they are presented to us. And I think This is taking us pretty much almost up to 67. It is the hierarchy. Technically speaking, says DK, it is the hierarchy which is impressed from Shambhala, and humanity which is reached by the hierarchy via the method of invocation and evocation. Humanity is evoked. It is invoked and evoked by hierarchy. And within the human family, two things occur as the result of this received and recognized activity of a phase of the science of contact. Now, that's going to be all I'm going to do, and certainly in the sincere hope that it doesn't happen again the way it happened. The hierarchy impressed by Shambhala, humanity reached via hierarchy. Yeah. All right, friends, this is up to page 67, and what I'm going to do is send this out on a wing and a prayer, maybe, and we'll do it this way, because this would be the second part of 25.1. So I'll let Michael take care of this, because he really knows what he's doing. And let's see if I can oh, that's not what I want.